Dinner this week. Chris let me know what their favorite restaurant is and how we can make up for that. It's better than having them upset at us. But in spite of all that, it's going to be one of those days that we will etch in our church's history. Just a powerful night of worship, and I'm hoping that we'll continue to have nights that are just as good, if not greater, in our future. Amen? There are some dates that just kind of etch themselves into your memory, and for one reason or another. I want you to just think right now, if I were to ask you, give me a date that is significant to you, what would it be? Now, ready? How many of you are willing to say, the first date I thought of was my birthday? We could psychoanalyze you today, but we won't do that. But there are some dates that are important. Your birth date is important for you, right? If I told you February 14th, everybody knows that's what? It's Valentine's Day. Everyone knows that, right? If I say November 11th, that might resonate with some other people. Anyone know November 11th? Veterans Day, right? You might have served in the military. You may have a soft spot for people that have served. And stuff like that. Ready? For the history buffs here, July 20th, 1969. Man on the moon. We landed on the moon, right? Supposedly. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just having fun. Seriously. Just having fun. But wouldn't be the first time our government lies to us, right? Anyway. Ready? How about this one? Let's segue. My generation, January 28th, 1986. I hear whispers. Yell it out if you. Yes, the Challenger. You got it. Good, right? The Space Shuttle Challenger. I remember I was probably 9 years old, literally at recess. Back when I was a kid, you used to be able to go home for lunch. Right? You can walk home, eat lunch, and come back. And there was, look how crazy this day is etched in my head. I had a classmate named Matt Smith. I remember his name. Matt Smith comes back and he goes, "Did you hear what happened?" We were all at recess, so we didn't hear what had happened. And then all of a sudden, when they brought us back in the room, we found out what happened. And it was the unfortunate incident involving the Challenger shuttle, where Krista McAuliffe and some of her colleagues perished on that day. All right, here's another one. November 22nd, 1963. Kennedy, see? There are some days that are just, if I say September 11th, 2001, we all know, right? We all know. Ready? Let me lighten the mood up. Young people in the back. Ready? This one's for you. December 13th, 1989. Yo, Taylor Swift's birthday. Proud mom, fanatical daughter. Right? Wow. That came out fast. These days, right? A lot of these days are powerful. Dates are important. And they make their way into our lives and they become unforgettable. And oftentimes, they're important to us. But that there's one day throughout the calendar that is important to Christians, and it's celebrated by non-Christians, not just in America, but all over the world. Millions and millions of people from different nations, ethnicities, cultures worldwide recognize Christmas. They recognize Christmas. Now, for kids, many of them, they love the fact that Santa's making his rounds and delivering toys, right? Love that. For those on the good list, you pray that your family and friends buy you something nice, right? And if you're my age on the naughty list, you do what I do every year. I buy myself something nice. I don't need Santa. Nobody knows Pastor Mark better than Pastor Mark, right? But it's this time of the year where we can get easily stressed out, church. We can get easily stressed out. Many of us are busy trying to get our homes ready for the winter or for the holidays, and my wife thinks she married Bob Vila from Home Improvement. Honey, I think we need a second tree for the living room. I'm like, we don't live in the White House. I'm like, I don't even like putting up the first one, and you want me to go get a second one? My thing is, what will the neighbors think? You know what I mean? I don't want them to think that we're too pretentious, right? And then my wife wants to hang lights on the front of the house and do all sorts of stuff that handy people do. Do I look like I'd be comfortable on a ladder? It gets stressful. It gets stressful if you let it. And then what do stressful people do? Well, we do two things really quickly when we get stressed out. The first one is eat. A lot of people do a lot of emotional eating, comfort foods, right? And the second thing we do is we shop, right? Amazon becomes your best friend. But you know what? It doesn't take away the stress of the holidays because we always find a reason to stress. We always find something to stress about. Ready? Here's what happens. Amazon becomes your best friend. Your favorite food place gets the order wrong. Amazon didn't deliver on the second day like they promised, you know what I mean? And you're upset because you have to wait third day. And we just find reasons to be stressed out about. We can always find something to stress us out. And, in my family, we do a Yankee swap every year. Anyone here love Yankee swaps? You're weird. Just kidding. I like Yankee swaps. There's a lot of fun in Yankee swaps, but the joy just gets totally removed when you pick number one, right? Number two, right? Number one's the best one, right? So you want the first one or you want the last one, right? I always get 2.5. It's just not fun, but we do it, and if you're unfamiliar with a Yankee swap, it's you get to select a gift, and if you don't like it, you can choose a gift that someone else already had. Now, you can approach it one of two ways. It's a time of revenge, right? Which Priscilla says is my approach. I look at my siblings in particular. Is there something that my brother or my sister really lit up that they want, and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to do with feminine products, but that's okay. You ain't getting it, right? It's whatever. It could be anything. And as long as you don't get it, I just have some fun with that, right? But there's another reason why I think I like Yankee swaps a whole lot. I think it reminds me a little bit about some of the ways in which we can approach God. You're going to be like, come on, Pastor, that's a little bit of a stretch. But bear with me for a little bit. You see, each of us at some point or another, we opened up something that we thought that we might have liked or wanted. You picked a good number, and then you went and you picked the best thing possible that your eyes could see, and then all of a sudden you open it up, and it's not what you wanted. Or maybe you hold on to it, and over the course of time, you realize you opened something up in your life that isn't serving you well the longer you hold on to it now. It looked good in the package, but once it's opened up, it was something that ended up being more like a curse instead of a blessing. And how many of us have ever held on to something for far too long that we knew wasn't a blessing? And Christmas becomes a beautiful reminder of how much, like a Yankee swap, we can take certain things in our lives and we can give them to Jesus, and in exchange, he's the best gift giver there is. You see, God is the only one that can take everything that is wrong, all of our hurt, all of our pain, and we can gift wrap it and surrender it to him. And what does he do? He exchanges it with his joy, his peace, and his love. This is Christmas. Jesus' desire isn't for us to carry around emotional weights for our entire life, to stop us from experiencing all that he has for us. His goal is always to draw us closer to himself and to make us more like him. This is the goal in Christianity. But sometimes with the weight of the world, it's hard for us to see that. With the stress of the world, it's hard for us to see that. And I'm reminded of the resurrection story of Jesus that's found in John chapter 20. In John chapter 20, what we have is the story where Mary Magdalene, a woman who had been restored by Jesus, she had been rejected by all of society and humanity, is renewed and is in a right relationship with Jesus. Jesus has already suffered the cross, and this is day 3. Mary Magdalene shows up, and the stone has been removed. And Mary Magdalene is still probably overcome with grief as a result of the 3-day torture that Jesus has gone through on the cross. And when she finds an empty tomb, she can't even understand what is going on here. She wasn't able to recall Jesus' foretelling of everything that would happen on that 3rd day. Grief has a way of doing that. Stress has a way of doing that, causing us to be unable to recall truth. So what do? We stress out our lives. But this is where the story gets good in verses 10 through 14. It says this, then the disciples went back to where they were staying. Now Mary stood outside the tomb, what? Crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, woman, why are you crying? They've taken my Lord away, she said, and I don't know where they've put him. At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize it was Jesus. Church, I'm telling you that Mary had a direct encounter with the risen Jesus, and she doesn't even realize that it's him standing before her. So how can this be? Well, the truth is that it's possible to know Jesus but not see Jesus. It's possible to know Jesus but not be able to see Jesus. Grief, pain, stress, anxiety, you name it. Emotions can cause us to not see Jesus, even if he's standing right in front of us. Even if he's working around us, even if he's doing things and maneuvering and positioning, he's protecting, he's sustaining. We don't see the way Jesus is at work because we allow our emotions to get the best of us, and it causes us to be blinded. Mary Magdalene, she knew Jesus, she knew what he looked like, she even knew the sound of his voice. But in this instance, her emotional state didn't allow her to see Jesus while he was standing right before her very eyes. And this isn't just a condition that occurs with Mary in the story. That same condition still happens today to a lot of believers. This happens to a lot of believers today. We live in a world that's ravaged with sickness, plagued with fear, many gripped with anxiety. You read the newspapers, if that's even a thing anymore, right? But you look around, there's protests. There's families in mourning over lost ones, friendships and relationships that have been severed and broken and bruised, financial insecurity, depression impacting the lives of our loved ones, friends and families that are fighting disease and illness, political divide in our nation, businesses shutting down, inflation and unemployment. Do you want me to go on and on? I don't know if you realize, but the world is in a really, really dark place. The world is in a really, really dark place, but the church of God doesn't have to be in a dark place. The world might be in a dark place, but the children of God do not have to be in a dark place. Why? Because we have the light of the world. And it's very easy to lose sight of God in times such as these. Not only do we lose our view of Jesus, but our vision becomes focused on other things. And let me tell you what people that are going through dark times tend to focus their thinking on. They start with an abandonment process. God, are you there? Do you even care about me right now? I feel so what? Alone, right? If you've ever gone through a deep, dark tunnel, this is what happens to people like us when we've gone through it. Then you start asking different types of questions. How long will this last? I don't know how long I can take this anymore. Can my heart handle any more? Right? Will things ever get back to normal? Or what? Or the way they were. Right? These are all questions that we start asking ourselves. And if we're not careful, our hearts and our minds begin to go down some scary rabbit holes in our attempts to try to find answers. Try to find answers to a lot of these questions. Now, I want to be clear about something. Questions are not necessarily a bad thing. Well, Pastor Mark, you kind of made it seem like questions are a bad thing. They're not a bad thing. You know why questions aren't a bad thing? Because questions cause us to seek. Questions cause us to seek. And the Bible says that if you seek, you will find, okay? So if what your heart is desiring is an answer, well, God is a revealer of truth and desires to speak and have a relationship with his children. So questions cause us to seek, and in our seeking, we find. We find. A lot of times we struggle with the pursuit of God, but let me just tell you, he's the God who chases. Our questions lead us to try to solve problems that are way beyond our understanding. And those questions will only lead us to a pathway of hopelessness and despair. But what if desperation has a different purpose? What if our pursuit of answers to everything that's wrong in the world today is the wrong approach? What if everything that's wrong in the world or in the world around me is actually an opportunity to draw closer to God? Would it change how you view difficult seasons? Would it change the ways in which you approach God? Would it change your prayer life? Would it change your thought life? Would it change you at all? If God allows seasons of struggle so that you can experience his hand of salvation. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that we're ever going to have all the answers to all of the questions that we face in this lifetime. But yet we find ourselves chasing after questions that we'll never be able to answer. But what if God wants us to grow in our trust and learn to be a little bit more childlike in our ability to trust him with all the things that are going on in our lives? You see, I'm going to say something that's very prophetic and profound. I believe that a lot of people fail to experience God because they won't let go of themselves. I believe a lot of people fail to experience God because they refuse to let go of themselves, their way, their thinking, their conformity, their opinion of how God should show up and how God should do it, when he should do it. Well, church, I'm here to tell you today that the minute you learn to let go, you'll experience God in a greater way. And I love what King David had to say in Psalms 131. Look what it says in verses 1 through 3. It says, Lord, my heart is not proud. My eyes are not haughty. I don't concern myself with matters too great or too awesome for me to grasp. Instead, I have calmed and quieted myself like a weaned child who no longer cries for its mother's milk. Yes, like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord. This is a word for Riverside. O Israel, O Riverside, put your hope in the Lord now and always. Now and always. We got to stop concerning ourselves with things that are beyond our grasp or even our understanding and begin to learn to entrust them to God. The psalmist doesn't tell us to read. The psalmist doesn't tell us to learn more. The psalmist doesn't tell us to seek out more knowledge and more wisdom. No, he says if you're going to be on a pursuit of anything, we got to learn how to put our hope in the Lord now and forever. You want to know the secret to life? Seek God. That's the secret to life. Why? Because he's the God who comes. We have to trust in the God who is faithful to his word because he is the word. He's the word that became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. That's what the Bible says. This is what true Christmas is. It's celebrating and honoring the Lord because Jesus knew that we could never work our way into heaven, so he left heaven to make a way for us. Come on, that's worthy of worship, isn't it? He knew we could never work our way into heaven, so what did he do? He left the comforts of heaven. He left his position of glory to make a way for you and I. That's love. But too often our seasons and our circumstances have a way of getting us to remove our focus from Christ, and we place it on ourselves and the things happening around us, and we become like Mary Magdalene near the tomb, missing Jesus, unable to hear his voice. And while Christmas is only celebrated one time a year, we have to learn how to make Christmas a daily remembrance of all that Jesus has done for us. And here's another small secret. The more and more our lives become focused on God's faithfulness, the greater our faith in God becomes. The greater. And the more and more we become focused on God's faithfulness, the greater our faith in God becomes. And the longer we've learned to rely and trust in him, the calmer we are when everything around us is in chaos. I got a few text messages after Friday. They're like, Pastor, you're funny. I'm like, it's late, but I'm going to play. Let's see. Why? Pastor, the fire alarm is going off, and you're just like, hey, so-and-so do this. Hey, you do this, you do this. And then you cracked a joke. I was like, oh, I can see why people would think that's funny, right? But you know what it is? Is that I thrive in chaos. Seriously, there are some people that are really good in a crisis. So like what freaks most people out, I'm just like, yeah, you should call the Haverhill Fire Department, let them know it's not a critical emergency. Our first impression seems we should open up some windows and get all the doors cracked, and then I'm not letting Satan win tonight. We're going to keep going, right? But listen, church, that's not because Pastor Mark's that good. That's just because Pastor Mark has learned to trust in the goodness of God, right? Like when everything else is failing, when everything else is going kaput, when everything else is in disorder, I know that there is nothing disordered about the God that I serve. I know that he's still seated on the throne. I know that he's still orchestrating the affairs of the kingdom. I know that whatever is troubling me doesn't trouble the God that I serve. And this is the hope that we have to have. This is the hope of Christ. This is the Christ in Christmas. He's the God who is purposeful. He's a radical God who loves immensely, that he's willing to give his life in exchange. He gave his life so that we wouldn't have to. He's a God who is purposeful in his pursuit so that our lives can be filled with his love. I can't think of a greater love than that. Christmas can't just be another day in which we celebrate Jesus' birthday. But even if it is, can we take a page from the three wise men, the three kings, right? If you know the story, you know the story. In Matthew 2, we have the three kings, and these are some of the highest noble men in all of the land. They're wicked smart. No one's smarter than these men. Arguably, some of the richest men in all of the known land. They had an intelligence that was above average. They were astronomers too. They also understood all the cosmic happenings in the sky that was available to the modern time at that time. No one wiser, no one smarter, no one more influential. They knew all of the richest people in the region. They dined with kings and princesses. They were people of high stature. They see this cosmic event happening in the heavens, and they quickly realize, wait a second, the Jewish people have spoken of a time like this, that this would happen in the heavens. This must be their Messiah. So they travel to where this cosmic event is happening in the heavens. And what do? They encounter the King of Kings that had just been born. And what do the wisest, richest, most noble people in all of the known world do? They bowed down and they worshiped. They bowed down and worshiped. See, on that birthday, they brought Jesus, the Messiah, gifts. They brought gifts to Jesus. And the question that we should ask ourselves on this day is, what gift can I bring Jesus today? So I'm going to ask the ushers to come forward with the offering plates. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Would have been a good time to collect a really awesome offering, though, right? But that's not what we're going to do. You knew you were in trouble when you came here today and there were index cards on the pews, right? If there's not one in the front pew, grab one from the neighbors behind you, okay? There's extras. Every 3 feet, there's about 3 or 4 index cards. Grab one if you don't mind. And here's what we're going to do, church. I want you to grab the index cards that have been located throughout the pews. And for those of you that maybe are watching at home, you can grab a piece of paper and simply begin to think about this question. What can you bring to Jesus? What can you bring to Jesus? You see, the 3 kings, I want you to pay close attention to this. The 3 kings brought Jesus valuable gifts. And I'm not asking you this morning to bring Jesus your wealth today. The beauty of Jesus is his ability to take not just the good things in your life, but Jesus is also able to accept the things that have been robbing us of life. So this morning, the question is, what can I bring Jesus today that he can exchange for my good? What can I bring Jesus today that he can exchange for my good? I don't know what your 2023 has been like. Maybe for some, it's been a year filled with lots of emotional hurt, worry, fears. Maybe that's something that you can write down on your card. And as you begin writing, I want you to ask God to don't just take the index card and write down emotional pain or my marriage or this, that. I want you to write it, and then I want you to pray over it. As you gift it to Jesus, what I want you to do is say, God, in the place of my pain that I'm surrendering to you, would you replace it with your joy? God, in place of my broken marriage, would you replace it with a restored marriage? God, in the place of my unrest, my heavy heart, and my mind that doesn't stop racing, would you give me your peace? I want you to write those things down and then pray that God would give you the answer, the antidote to those things that are robbing you of life. This might be the year where your family fell apart or parts of you feel like they did. Write that down. Give it to Jesus. But also tell him what you want. What else could we write? Financial hardships and burdens. Maybe you're here today and you have health issues. You need employment. Maybe it's a character defect. Maybe it's a particular sin that you've been wrestling with for all too long, and you have never confessed it. You have never surrendered it to Jesus, and you wonder why you haven't been freed and delivered from it. Maybe it's time for you to surrender it to Jesus. Maybe your faith has been shaken. You need a fresh encounter with Jesus. Write that down. And if you've already written it down, here's what I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask our worship team to make their way forward. And they're going to lead us in a worship song. We're going to worship the Lord together as we close out this service. But then here's what I want us to do. As the worship team is leading us in worship, I want you to take your card and I want you to lay it here at the steps of this altar. And this is us bringing our gift to Jesus and laying it down. And then here's the verbal command I'm going to give you today. When you lay it down, don't pick it back up. When you lay it down, do not pick it back up. That's what the enemy of your soul wants to do. He wants you to surrender, pick it back up, surrender, pick it back up. And then what happens? You get frustrated with life and you start thinking that there's something wrong with your God. There's nothing wrong with God. There's just students that have a hard time learning the lessons. And what do? We return back to the place of our hurt and we pick it back up. And I'm here to tell you today that if you want to be freed, surrender it to Jesus and refuse to pick it back up. Today is ceremonially. This is what we're doing. But I believe that as you're walking back and you're worshiping, I think something's going to break in the spirit. I believe God is going to begin to deliver and God's going to begin to heal deep hurts. Now listen, some stuff happens instantly and some things require a process, but today becomes day one of the process. Let's stand with me, please. Let's worship the Lord this morning. Let's bring our pain to the altar.